Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Family Ministry Podcast, where we talk all about children's ministry, student ministry, partnering with parents, next-gen strategy, everything for ministering to kids and students from nursery all the way up through high school and into college, and everything in between there. Topics that hit all of those areas, and even deep diving into specific ministry areas, which is kind of like what we're going to do today. We're going to talk with Justin Herman. He's been on the podcast before. He's back again. We're talking a little bit about his personal life and what's going on, and stepping away from the church that he was going to when we last spoke to him. And so we dive into that a little bit. And I know a lot of you have either been through a staff transition, you've changed churches, maybe you're thinking about changing churches, or maybe you never have. But even if you haven't, this is a good interview to listen to, because I think there's lessons to be learned from Justin's experience. And then we kind of shift gears and we talk about the Controlled Chaos book, Making Sense of Junior High Ministry, written by Kurt Johnston, who's been on the podcast. And then Justin has commentary all throughout the book. And we talk about some of the key points in the book, recruiting volunteers to lead with middle school ministry, partnering with parents, that transition from 5th grade into 6th grade for kids and for their parents. How do you make that work? So you're going to love this interview. It's a great interview. But before I jump in, I want to let you know that we opened registration for the summer session of Ministry Boost courses yesterday. If you're listening to this when the podcast comes out, and it's only open for, I think it's 12 days. So there's 2 weeks. Some courses will be open all the time, but some of them will only be open for these 12 days. And certainly there are certain bonuses you can get that you're only going to get during these 12 days of the launch. And some of those you can only get if you register by certain dates. Like, for instance, tomorrow is when the first bonus goes away. So there's extra courses you can get for free. If you buy a course, you'll get a strategy for training your volunteers. That's a course you'll get for free. You'll get 5 barriers to volunteer recruitment for free as well. We've got a ministry health assessment, some residency internship documents, and even kind of like a huddle content. If you gather your volunteers and as part of a huddle, before they serve, to provide training and vision and pray for each other, give information, all that, we're going to give you some content that you can use to help train your volunteers in those huddles. But all of that are part of the bonuses that you can get with Ministry Boost if you register for a course this summer. But I think the thing I'm most excited about is all the new courses. We have something like 8, I think, new courses that are available this summer. Courses about launching elementary small groups, launching preschool small groups. I'm so excited that we have Allie Evans from Life Church doing a course on developing leaders, which, man, that is just a hallmark of Life Church from my experience. They are excellent at that, and you actually get to learn how they do it and how you can do it. Building the bench, like getting volunteers to serve and be on teams to help when you need subs and people to fill gaps and stuff like that, or maybe rethinking your staff structure. I'm also really excited about Lisa Malidi doing a course on upstaging elementary, like your large group experience in elementary ministry, and then adding a middle school course with Justin Herman, another course with Justin about reaching local schools, about reaching Generation Z with Shane Sanchez. So we're really expanding our courses to include more student ministry options. So there's just a lot that's available this summer. We're really excited about it, getting all these different voices in there. But like I said, the window to register is short. So if you want to get all the bonuses, be sure to register today or tomorrow, I think, is when the first one goes away, at ministryboost.org. As usual, you can download all the links and notes and all that stuff that we talk about, and you can get it at nickblevins.com/episode 147. But let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Justin Herman, getting an update on his life, the transition that's happened from coming off staff at Sandals, and what he's learning from that process, and then Controlled Chaos, the book, and what's in there. So here we go. Well, it's good to have Justin Herman back on the podcast. Welcome back, Justin.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me back. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've been on, so this is exciting.
It is. It's exciting. And I believe when you were last on, you were just making a move in terms of a new church, and now things have changed again. But in case somebody didn't listen to that episode yet, which they should, introduce us to yourself again. Tell us about your family, but then give us an update and where you are right now.
Sure. So, last time it feels like a lifetime ago. It honestly feels like a lifetime ago. My name is Justin. I do a podcast called the Controlled Cast Podcast. You can find it anywhere that you find podcasts. And I used to work at a church called Mariners, left that church to a church called Sandals. I was there for 9 months. That was the big first transition. I was there for 9 months, and about 5 months in, it was obvious that it just wasn't working out. Wasn't working out for me, wasn't working out for them. And 9 months in, we just had a very serious discussion, and it was kind of ramping up to discussions where they said, we don't feel like this is working out. I said, man, I feel the same way. And they said, well, we want to make a change, and here's what we're willing to offer you to kind of just walk away from the table. And it was good enough. And I said yes. And we parted ways, the church and I went job hunting for a couple months, which totally surreal. I'm looking inside the church, outside the church, and then finally landed at a spot, actually, oddly enough, doing sales for a company that a buddy of mine from Mariners owns, or is it the CEO of, doesn't own it, is the CEO of it. And it's probably not forever, but it's for right now, and it's really good. And I've been keep doing the podcast. The book came out since then. Control Chaos, Kurt was incredible. Did speaking stuff and just enjoying all of that. But in the midst of, an insane transition, which, rocked the entire family in a very serious way. But now I'm settling in, continuing to do the podcast, having a blast, and just enjoying life.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got a job. You got this job with a friend from Mariners, which is awesome. And we're going to talk about the book, Controlled Chaos. But before we do that, it's just, I thought it'd be great for anybody listening, but student pastors for sure. Most people are experiencing transitions at different points and different jobs, and what's that like, and the fit and all that. Tell us, I know, but tell us what the job was like at Sandals that was different than what you had done maybe at Mariners, because it was a different type of role, right?
Yeah. Oh, completely different. So at Mariners, I oversaw junior high ministry. So I was the guy for junior high, and I had a team that I worked with they were incredible. Some of them are still there working in the junior high department. And I moved over to Sandals, not to be in charge of a ministry, but to oversee all the youth ministry across all of the campuses, and to do it from the network side. So it's not a hands-on with students, not hands-on with leaders. You're kind of coaching, mentoring the staff as they go and do the youth ministry. So there's these different kind of, barriers between you and students, and you and leaders, and you and parents. And at first I thought, this is going to be a great job. For me, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to be, I'm going to be getting work with staff and developing them as leaders. And, I'm going to get a lot of my joy from that. And what I realized really quickly was managing from behind a desk was miserable. Not miserable for everybody, but it was miserable for me. And it just did not feel comfortable. I wasn't happy doing it. So then I, tried to be a little more hands-on with stuff, and no one wants me hands-on. And it became a situation where it was just obvious they wanted someone who was ready not to be with students anymore, to be in a more managerial position. And that's what kind of led to the discussion after discussion, which led to me parting ways with the church. And, but now the job I'm in now, totally different, obviously. And it's a fire flood restoration company. So whenever there's a fire or a flood somewhere, I go and I drive there, and I connect with the person who kind of owns the building or whatever, and I tell them about what we do, and I build relationships with them. And it's just completely different from what I do in some ways, and it's very similar. You're pastoring people and caring for people, even though they don't call it that. But man, it's been a whirlwind for sure.
Yeah, and any new job has challenges. Obviously, this was quite a different kind of role. What were some of the, specific things that were challenging about the role with Sandals, other than, hey, you weren't really in it anymore? You were kind of behind the scenes, not really on the front lines, which is a big deal. I've heard a lot of people have the same experience in a multi-site role, especially where, and this might be how Sandals was, where as a central team person, you don't really have any authority. You're just kind of helping. Like, hey, let me help you take this, or consultant almost, but not really any authority. What were some other challenges?
It's so interesting because, and I've talked about this a couple times. So someone was to go back and listen to all the podcasts that I've done where I've talked about this, and listen to them in sequential order, not of when they were released, but when I recorded them, like every time it gets a little bit more, clarity around the whole situation. Because now looking back at it, there were, and so to give specifics, there were a lot of questions that I didn't ask that I should have asked during the interview process. And I didn't ask them because I was looking for a job. Me and my family decided to make a move. I think I talked about that last time, so I'm not going to go over the whole thing again. But it was definitely the looking for a job, and this opportunity popped up. There are a lot of questions I didn't ask that I should have asked. Probably number two, there's a pace that I moved at that I just shouldn't move at that pace. I should have moved a lot slower than I did. I think I went in even thinking like, I'm going to ease into it. But, then you get in and it's like fire after fire and issue after issue. And there was not alignment between the executive team, who's telling me one thing, and the ministry team, the ones who are at the campuses, who are expecting a different thing. And I was not a master of connecting and interpreting those things. I'm just not great at that. It's okay for me to admit that there's some things I'm not great at. And that was one of those things I was definitely not great at. But those mixed signals, mismessaging, and I'd probably say really early, there were some red flags just about the church in general. Now, again, it's not a bad church. I'd recommend friends to go work there, but that church needs a specific kind of personality. One of the executive pastors when I was leaving was just really honest with me and told me that, Sandals is the kind of church where there can only be one Matt Brown. Matt Brown's the senior pastor, is the founding pastor of the church. Driver personality, aggressive, talented, hilarious. Great teacher of God's word, visionary, knows where we're going, willing to run over people to get there sometimes in a loving way, not a bad thing, all the time, in the right dose, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, at Sandals, there can only be one Matt Brown, and you probably just had a little too much Matt Brown in you to last here. Now, that was a completely off the record. That's why I'm not saying what executive pastor told me, but it completely off the record, off the cuff, honest, response that when I look back at it and say, you know what, just totally right. Like when I look around the church, a lot of really great people who want to serve that vision and take really clear direction. And for someone who, kind of has an idea of and a vision they have for a ministry and kind of they want to go a direction, it's not the best fit. Mariners was definitely entrepreneurial. Figure it out. Go and be agile and figure out the ministry. Sandals definitely franchise model. We're a McDonald's and we want every location to look the same. And it can be a great church, and I think I'm a great youth worker. And sometimes those two things don't mix, and that's okay. And so there's a lot of freedom in that. For youth workers who've gone through that, and I've talked to literally hundreds. Since I announced it and talked about it on our podcast, I think episode 54, I've literally talked to hundreds of youth workers who've gone through the same thing, been let go from a church. The whole thing was rough. And just their story is sometimes a really painful story, but man, oh man, do I get it. Like I've experienced it. Like it's, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Looking at it even now, 2.5, 3 months, after the fact, I think that I'm going to look back in a year and be so grateful that I parted ways with Sandals, because I think God is doing something in my life that he wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I have a few friends that have worked in multi-site churches, and one in particular at a central role. And he would say things like, because again, it was a large multi-site church, lots of campuses. And he would say you have like a lot of responsibility and no authority, and like you can only lead through relationship. And like as he would describe it, I would think the same thing where it's like, I don't know if I could do that. I've seen you say that you're an Enneagram 8, which is the same as me. And so like I could see why I don't know that I would love that either. He loved it. I mean, he's relational, people oriented. I mean, that's his thing. And and I don't want this to be negative, especially in certain climates, but in a sense, there's almost like a political part to it, where you don't just make decisions and people jump on and lead. There's a little bit of like, you got to work with people and work. You know what I mean? Like he would describe how he would build relationships with each campus pastor. And part of that was just so he could get the children's ministry and student ministry at the campus to be what he wanted it to be. You know what I mean? Which is not for everyone. I would imagine personality.
Here's the thing. If I was to take a recording of every meeting I was in when they were explaining to me, and I'm full disclosure, I care about the people at Sandals. I'd recommend people to work there. So I want to be completely clear on that. And what you said is completely accurate. If I was to go back in time, or even now have recordings of some of the coaching conversations we had, and every time they said the words relational equity, I was able to take a shot, I'd be hammered on the floor within 5 minutes. Because everything in a role like that is about relational equity. If you cannot figure out how to move change and manage change, not through logic, not through strategy, not through what's best for students, not through what is just reasonable to someone who's been in youth ministry for more than 30 minutes. If you can figure out how, because those ways won't work. If you can figure out how to make change through relational equity, and in a lot of ways building that from scratch with a group of people who think everything's awesome, then you would be wildly successful. But I could not do that. And it ended up, in the end, it ended up costing me my job, obviously, because the culture of the church very much was exactly what you described. Everybody's cool, the central team, they're there to support and help, and there's no authority, and it's all from the campus pastor, and there's a lot of people who thrive in that environment. For this season, at least, at 34, I wasn't one of them. I look at Kurt, and he's been doing it for 20 years. He gets it. He's the relational guy. So me and him do Controlled Cast podcast together. We did the book. It's his book. I added a bunch of commentary to his book, and we re-released it. But me and him are very, very different, and that's what makes the whole thing really fun. He is California cool, mellow. Mm-hmm. He breathes relationship. He's a 7 on the Enneagram, which I think is the enthusiast.
Yeah.
I'm very different than that, which makes our pairing really good. It makes a podcast really good. But obviously really great leaders can do it without being the Napoleon-esque, here's where we're going, everyone saddle up, who's coming with me, and not that they're putting the people ahead to be the first ones through the wall. They're willing to go through the wall first. And they're willing to take all the beating and all the pain that comes with that to clear the way for their people. But not everybody wants to just hop on board and just go in some direction. It's a leadership thing. Some leaders thrive. I thrived at Mariners for years. In some ways I really regret leaving there. And if I had the chance to go back, I probably would. But but all of this stuff, it happens for a reason. I think through talking with a lot of youth pastors who've shared some really rough stories. I was just talking to Justin Knowles. I was just texting with him the other day. He was let go from his church.
I saw that.
That's a really tough thing. A few too many DYM things, and bing, bang, boom. The church is like, what's the deal? And out the door. Really tough deal. My buddy Sean Mead, up at Bel Air Presbyterian, not there anymore. There's a lot of youth pastors that are really well known who have found themselves out of a job. Mm-hmm. There's a huge number behind that of youth pastors you never even heard of at churches you'll never even visit, who get let go over really trivial things. And it's really hard. I had a really good situation because of where we live near family, and my wife has a job, and there's all this different stuff. But, for the youth pastor who is, everything's falling apart and they're trying to figure out what's next for them. That's a really tough thing. I empathize with that completely differently than how I used to.
Yeah, I bet. And that's part of why I wanted to unpack it, because just like the examples you gave, odds are most youth pastors are going to change churches multiple times. And I think there's a lot to learn from what your experience there on two fronts. Because I was thinking about, one, you learned about the difference in like a multi-site church and central versus campus, but even personality of church. But then you also, you said some great things about different questions you would ask, and you would slow down in the beginning. And I was kind of wondering, what would you do different? If you had it to do over again, and maybe you'd stay at Mariners or maybe you'd ask more questions. And so then you would have stayed at Mariners. I don't know, but you kind of gave me that. That was good.
Well, it's just so interesting. You caught, this is such a weird day, the day we're recording this, because, so here's a little window into my personal life. And I feel like your podcast is more of like you create space for more of the personal life, not just tactics. That's one of the reasons I love listening to your podcast. So here's a window into my real life. I have a kid with special needs. He has autism, and he's absolutely incredible. It doesn't matter what his name is, but he's absolutely incredible. And we had a really great company that we worked with in Orange County to do his behavior therapy. So we had a person 20 hours a week that worked with him, and he's high functioning. But anyone who has a kid with autism knows that those early years are the most important years. Luckily, my wife has a specialty in this, and this is what she does. She's a psychologist, works in the public schools with special needs kids, and as a school psychologist. So when we moved from Orange County, we left that company and went with a new company. And this new company has just been a revolving door of people. It's been really, really, really tough. And to the extent that we haven't had a solid person for a while. And we just see him regressing. Like, we see all these old behaviors coming out, all these old things that it's like, oh man, we were past that. And now like we're regressing back to it. Mm-hmm. And when we were putting my kids to bed, my wife, looked at me and she's just like, we should go back to Orange County. We should just go back there and, go back to, cause she's thinking the old company and, getting BTs that can, but you look at the whole body of this and it's like, okay, we left to be close to family, bought a house, I took a job at a church that she grew up at. Like, this should be like now she lives, we live close to her work. This should be a fairy tale thing. And I assure you, that is what we thought. We built up this image of how wonderful this decision was. And now we're looking back 9 months later and it's complete chaos. And everything that was put together is completely destroyed. And we're looking at it saying, okay, well, what do we do now? I got fired from the church I was working at. Where are we going to go to church? Well, we're actually going back to Mariners Church. So we go back to Mariners every weekend. We drive an hour to go there because the teaching's incredible and worship's incredible. And there's people who go there who know us and love us. We're looking at things with our kid and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with that. There's a lot of unintended consequences. Now, do I think God was in it when we made the decision? Absolutely. Yet here we are and we're trying to navigate through it, and it's not as clear and polished and perfect as I think we would like it to be. But I think that a lot of other people would think, well, shouldn't it be though? We're Christians, right? We're followers of Jesus. Like it should all work out. And the truth is, it isn't all working out. But God's big enough for us to say, why is this happening, Lord? It shouldn't be this way. Like, God's big enough to hear those doubts, those concerns, those frustrations. And so, eventually I'll work back in the church. There's a lot of things I'll do differently, I'm sure, as I come in. One, take the right kind of job, not just a job, take the right kind of job. But I think I got to start off at a different kind of pace. I think naturally I move at a high rate of speed, but taking a breather. It was right before I was let go. It's so funny. I was sitting down with the student ministry guy over at Harvest, Greg Laurie's church. It's in Riverside, actually, where I live, and he was talking about stepping into a position kind of like mine that I had at Sandals, where I was overseeing everything. Stepping into a position like that at Harvest, and he's like, "What advice would you give?" And I gave him this advice. I said, hey, you should, when you go in there, start slow, spend the first 2 months, you really getting to know people, hear their vision for the ministry. Then, 3 months in, take everyone away for a big, brainstorming, day and then develop a strategy, let them speak into it. Like, it might be a 6-month process, but it's okay. And I'm paraphrasing a lot of it. And he looked at me and he said, is that what you did when you started at Sandals? And I looked at him and I said, absolutely not. and I wish that I did. I wish that I did, because I did it all wrong. And eventually I'll get the opportunity again, and I'm going to learn from my mistakes. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I've learned a lot, and not just personally, because there's personal struggles that are going on in the midst of all of it that matter so much more. Where my kid is at developmentally in 2 years matters so much more than this other stuff. Like, I would trade all of that for my kid being right. I think that's us, what we're called to as parents. Yeah. But there's so much more complexity, so many more unintended consequences to any one decision. I think I'm experiencing that differently now. Yeah, and I hope people that are listening hear that, because they're, again, odds are they're going to be confronted with an opportunity, a chance to make a move, and the phrase "the grass isn't always greener." I just think. I found that, like you said, you would have asked more questions. I find that that's true on both sides. Like, not all churches, but
churches themselves don't ask enough questions sometimes in the hiring process. And then the other thing too is churches don't reveal enough. And then on the other side, when it's us trying to get the job, we don't ask enough questions. And I think I haven't really been in that place, because I grew up in one church and then came on staff to help start this church. Has only been in these two churches. But that's one thing I've observed from hearing stories like yours, where I wonder what it would be like for me to interview at another church, because I feel like at some point I'd be annoying. Like, okay, that's enough with the questions. We've told you enough. You don't need to see how everything works before you get hired. But it's that reason. Like, I hope people, one of the things they take away from this is just to be diligent and take time, like you said. I think that'll be really helpful for people. That's good.
And pay attention to red flags. I think that was the biggest thing. There's a guy I talked to who worked at Sandals, then left Sandals, go work at another church, came back to Sandals and only lasted there like 3 months and then left. And we had mutual friends. And so when I was interviewing there, my friends connected me, and he said some really truthful things that at the time I was like, oh yeah, well that's just you. Like I'm a really good leader. Like those things, I'm not going to have to worry about those things. But man, oh man, was I wrong. It was paying attention to red flags, taking seriously the advice of friends. I mean, that's really important stuff. Stuff I didn't do, stuff I'd look back on. I wish I would have done. It's a deal. It's a deal for sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being so open and honest about it. And I told you, via text the other day, you're just handling it really well. And I was not surprised when you did like the Facebook Lives and kind of were talking to other student pastors about it, and you've had hundreds of conversations. It doesn't surprise me one bit, because there are just so many people out there in a similar boat or close to it or just came out of it. You know what I mean? So keep it up.
Well, it's just one of those things that if you are one of those people who plays it close to the vest, and you do the whole, we just parted ways for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. And so we're going to try something. God's calling us into something. And, that it's like people see through that like 1,000,000% of the time. Like 1,000,000% of the time, there's always more to the story. There's always more to the story. So I just find it liberating to just say, and I know a lot of people sign do not resuscitate. Those are DNRs. What are they
do
called?
not compete, DNC?
No, whatever. When you can't talk about, like a non-disclosure.
Mm-hmm. Non-disclosure, yeah.
And, we had Andy Stanley on the podcast, on Control Cast, and that was one of the things, a big red flag when it comes to identifying churches who are like that. Do they have their staff sign non-disclosures when they part ways? So it was a really good insight for him. But so a lot of youth pastors can't talk about it, why they left or what really happened. And another great thing that I can say about Sandals is that when I left, I was very honest with them. Hey guys, I need to get a job. And if I give this vanilla flavored, we just decided randomly to just be unemployed because unemployment is just so cool. We thought we'd try it out for a while. Like that's just no one's going to believe that. And being a youth pastor, here's the thing, unless you can be honest and not have someone point at you and say, no, he's lying, then everyone's always going to think it's a moral failure. And I know that people are going to listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, that sounds like that's not true at all. The truth is, it is true. When there's no details, people will fill in the blanks, and they'll fill in the blanks with the things that people see most often. When it's so obvious that you're just not being forthcoming with whatever the reason is, they'll fill in the blanks with like, all right, well, why aren't they forthcoming? What must it be? And it must be that, right? I mean, that's what's in the news. They don't want to embarrass the church, whatever. But that's what's on people's minds. People may want to disagree with that, but it's just the truth. From my perspective, at least, it's the truth. And I did not want that. I did not want anyone thinking like, oh, is there a moral thing going on? Something he can't talk about? And so I told the church, listen, I got to tell people that we walked in a room and this didn't work out, and that you gave me the chance to resign before you were going to fire me. I need to be able to say that. And if I can't say that, then I'm going to do it anyway, regardless of severance or not, because I have to be able to get a job and I need to be honest about it. And to their credit, they were like, we totally understand. We back you 100%. Their only request was to read whatever I posted before it went live. I sent it over to them. They made a couple edits that I could live with, and they sent it back to me. I posted it, and that was the story. So to their credit, they helped me be honest with why, and that really helped me. I mean, that helped me with. I mean, I never gave that kind of ability to people I let go at points in my career, which I view that with a whole lot of regret and a whole lot of empathy now in a way that I never did before. But yeah, to their credit, they really helped me be able to be honest, so that I didn't have to make up stories or have people come to me like, hey, well, what's the real story? Like when you say, hey, listen, I walked in the room, they said they were going to fire me. They gave me a chance to resign, because it just wasn't working out. There is no like, oh, well, what's the real story? It's like, well, that seems pretty real what you just said. So there is no like behind the scenes story. And then you can have dialogue from there, which makes it really healthy. And so that's all I'll say about that. But it's really a affirmation to the church that was the way they handled things. It allowed me to handle things.
Yeah, good for them. That's good. I don't love and I don't know if it's again being Enneagram 8 or what. I'm also, my second's a 5, so I love facts and truth and things like that. And maybe it's that, but I don't love I don't know what to call it, but the superficial thing that can come out sometimes in churches, even when, and this is probably like I don't know, a little controversial, but even when people are saying, God is moving us here, or God, and sometimes there's more to it that's not as much, like maybe God moved you there. Maybe it was a better, I don't know, job offer. Like it was, a different kind of job that you wanted more. Maybe things weren't great at the last church. And I don't think that's something the way you're talking about it, you don't gossip and, tear down, but also I don't love the other end of it either, where you really just never say anything and it's sort of kind of veiled and not lies, but generalities or whatever. So good for them for
generalities and fusion. Yeah. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. And good for both of you for handling it that way. Well, The other thing I wanted to talk about, we were supposed to record this a long time ago. But I wanted to talk about the book Controlled Chaos. And I know it's been out, but it's a re-release. And as I've read through and read lots of your commentary that gets in there, which is basically like every page, which is pretty cool. But for anybody who's not familiar, tell us about the book. And then I have a few questions based on the content in the book I'd love to hear you talk about.
Yeah. So just a quick backstory. There's a podcast that we do called Controlled Chaos Podcast. And when I started the podcast, Josh Griffin from Download Youth Ministry actually suggested the title of the podcast be Controlled Chaos. And I reached out to Kurt Johnston, who's a friend of mine, and said, hey, I'm thinking of starting this junior high ministry podcast. Can I call it Controlled Chaos? Like you wrote a book called Controlled Chaos. Can I do it? He said, yes. And I said, I'd love to have you on the first episode. And he said, sounds good. And then I talked him into doing like once a month. And then I talked him into doing every other week. And now he's on every single episode with us moving forward. We do, we record a bunch in a row together, and he's on every single one now. And about probably, I don't know how many weeks into the podcast, he texted me like 5 a.m. and he said, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we do a rewrite of Controlled Chaos, like an update, and re-release it? And first we were talking about self-publishing it and, blah, 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 blah. He talked to Mark Stryker from the Youth Cartel. They said they'd love to publish it. And there was a book cancellation. It takes a while to get a book published. But there's a book cancellation and they were able to get it in there quick. So like me and Kurt really got to like rework on the content and writing. And it was re-released and it's been a blast. It's probably one of the first, new published youth ministry books that aren't built around a philosophy or a strategy, but it's built around tactics. It's built around a specific age group, junior high ministry. And it's just been an absolute blast. I got to have a big part in it that speaks to Kurt's generosity and humility. And yes, so that's the book. It's been a ride. It's been out for almost a year now, a little less than a year. And it's been a whole lot of fun.
I love the fact that, like you said, it's not just about a model. It reminds me in some ways of back my first ministry book I ever read, Purpose Driven Youth Ministry, and just how it covers so much, the ministry, like it hits all the parts of it. And one of the things, of course, is volunteers. I love that the title of that section is called Bus Riders Wanted. But what are some things that you would, recommend to youth leaders that are leading volunteers in middle school ministry when it comes to volunteers? Things to avoid, things to do.
Yeah, so here's a couple quick things. And I love volunteers. I've had a lot of volunteers in my time doing ministry. There is no cookie cutter volunteer. There's no specific profile other than philosophical profile that you're looking for in a volunteer. Like if you look out at your patio at your church, wherever your church meets, where people congregate, and you look out at the crowd and you maybe see, a whole lot of old people, a bunch of young people, people who are fashionable, people who are wearing suits and ties, people who walk with canes. And we usually, being the dumb youth workers, will say, oh, well, that person looks like they'd be great with students. That person doesn't look like they'd be great with students. And we make really superficial judgments that are completely inaccurate. When the reality is the mindset we need to have going into recruiting is every person can be a great volunteer in junior high. When I was in junior high, my volunteer, his name was Earl. He was super old. He was a World War II veteran, and he walked with a cane and he wore a suit and tie every week. And me and my 3 knucklehead buddies, we were just ridiculous. And he was there and he was consistent every single week. I remember speaking at his funeral, talking about the impact he made on my life. And I remember the other guys in the small group, who some of them I haven't seen in years before his funeral, spoke on the exact same thing, that he was consistent. He was there. He made an impact in our lives. So when we're looking for volunteers, know that the process is going to be what excludes people, background check, the interview, you interview them, they're just kind of weird. And you're like, okay, well, this person really isn't great for junior high. But if you start already taking people off the board, then you're going to limit yourself. And you have a diverse group of students. I was a youth pastor for years, and there were a lot of students I just didn't connect with. There was this one girl, this one specific girl. Every week, I would greet her with a big high five. Like I would do everything I could to connect with this one student, and I could never do it. She was very introverted. She was very quiet. She would look at me like I had 10 heads and had boogers dripping out of my nose. But she looked at me like I was a cancer. But her small group leader, she loved her. When she saw her small group leader, her scowl turned into a smile, like her, kind of closed reservedness turned into a really open, jovial, talking about her week. I could never give to that girl what her small group leader could. It wasn't a gender thing. It was a personality thing. There are different kinds of personalities that our students have. That means we need to have different kind of leaders to meet those personalities. So casting a really wide net and then scaling it down from there due to your, because of your process, to me, that's the key. And I think that, what I found, we typically have like 1 or 2 or 3 ways for people to serve. Be the small group leader, be the weekend leader, be the, candy bar person, you're the snack bar person, or the welcome team person. But we can't have like 3 or 4 things. Like I'm always challenging youth workers, like, have 10 or more things, have a big openness in your ministry to meet with a volunteer who clearly isn't made to be a small group leader, clearly isn't made to be on the welcome team, but is there some other way that they can use their gifts and talents to serve in your ministry? And we can't just say, oh, well, you're not a welcome team person, you're not a weekend person, you're not a midweek person or a small group person. I guess there isn't a place for you in junior high. That just isn't accurate, because sometimes these people can grow into some of these positions, as they go to leader trainings or developed, coach, so on and so forth. But there's always a place in the ministry that can use someone who has a passion to serve. The vast majority of people aren't going to get out of their seats to do anything. Like you could be up on stage begging them, please, I just need someone for our ministry. Please, somebody come help, please. And they'll all just sit there and look at you like, like what's going on with this person? Why are they freaking out? But so someone who's willing to give you their phone number or an email address, or they're willing to sit down and have coffee with you. If you got to find a place for them in the ministry. It's a really big deal. So we need to be diverse in how we think about roles for them. That's a really big thing.
Yeah, I know in the book you have one of the little comments you have was every role that paid staff can fill, volunteers can do just as well, and in some cases even better, which is true. Yeah, very true.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we will look at full-time, and listen, I was a full-time salaried youth worker. I was for almost over 10 years. I hired people who were full-time vocational youth workers. So I'm not bashing the full-time vocational youth worker. This is what I am saying. If you out there are listening and you are the full-time vocational youth worker, don't think the only way you can improve your ministry is by hiring staff. Because the truth is, your elders or your pastor or whoever's managing the money probably isn't going to give you the money you need to hire the amount of staff you wish you had. You wish you had an admin. You wish you had a groups person. You wish you had like a program person, maybe a worship person. Very few churches have the money for all those positions. I mean, it's just not realistic. So, but yet in your church are filled with experts in their field. Business people, psychologists. There's people who work at my church who worked at Disney. They understand something about program and like how to put something that's attractional together. You have guys in your church who are lawyers who used to be in a band who are just looking for an opportunity to relive the glory days of their rock and roll garage band dreams. But it's just a willingness for us to look at our church as more than just volunteers. We're going to give people tasks to manage or responsibilities to own. When you look at a person and say, hey, listen, you're the worship person, this is going to happen Wednesday night, or it's not going to happen, and it's going to be on you. And I'll help you with everything you need, but this is yours to own. And when it succeeds, you're the one I'm going to point to. And when it fails, I want everyone to point to me because I'm taking this off my plate. I'm putting it into your hands. Like, that's leadership development. A lot of people are not willing to do that. They're not willing to give up the control. I'm one of those people. So I'm not casting stones at anyone. I own that. It was really hard for me, even with staff, to say, take over the program. Okay, you run it. Because guess what? I like running program. I like, speaking into what the worship set should look like. I like speaking into groups curriculum. I like those things. But when we're able to take those things off of our plate and really give them to someone so they're really owning it, it changes the dynamic of the ministry. And clearly these people can do it. I mean, they have careers. They're running businesses. They're working in corporate America. I mean, they're doing stuff. Clearly they can do. Moms are not just sitting at home doing yoga. Like, they're managing the house. They're handling schedules. Like, they get how to manage things. How are we not putting them in charge of big pieces of our youth ministry in order to support the work that we believe God is doing in our local church? It just completely astonishes me. But it is so vital. It is so, so vital. And it's so easy to do. It costs you no money. And then you end up looking like the rock star. People are going to be coming to you saying, well, how are you doing that? How are you getting these people to do it? And it's like, well, people hate doing tasks, but people love being responsible if you give them the training and the trust. And that's what I've done. And they're going to look at you and be like, that's so easy. Like, show us how to do that. And you'll see your influence rise when you start handing off influence to other people. And I think that, to me, is like the big ticket item.
Yeah. And I think just in my experience, having served in both student ministry and children's ministry, oftentimes it's like in student ministry, because let's say if you got 30 students, you could manage it with 3 volunteers if you had to. You know what I mean? You see that a lot more. Even the survey that I've done and people can download, the number of like volunteers to students, the ratio is usually pretty low in churches. But the best ministries that I see, they do what you're saying. They empower tons of volunteers, and then the ratio is actually really high, like one volunteer for every 2 students or something like that, because they're doing so many different things that it becomes really healthy, thriving ministry, and it does help them to bridge the gap. Like our church right now is even in a place where I'd say we're in that middle where you can't hire another staff person in student ministry, so you got to bridge the gap with volunteers, until it grows to the point where you can, So that's good.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, one of the things you say in the book about parents specifically is you kind of urge leaders not to forget them in the transition to middle school.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, I think that is one that man, we can mess up as churches, and you can either like nail that transition and gain students as they go into middle school, or you can forget about it and then you lose them as they come out of kids ministry in the middle school. How have you done that transition well in church before? What are some of the tips you'd pass on?
And we're talking specifically on the parent side, right? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, but I'd love to hear anything. I mean, just generally, I'll take both. Like, if you got anything to help, because I think leaders want to know, how do I help get students from 5th grade children's ministry, if that's how your church is structured, into junior high ministry and not fall off and disappear?
All right, so here's a couple things. And again, this is my philosophy. This isn't everybody's philosophy. This is my philosophy. I believe that transition is a year-round strategy. It's a year-round strategy. So anyone who says, well, yeah, how do you do transition season? Well, transition is not a season. It's an event that takes place. Transition happens, in June or, May, if you do it at the end of summer, August, depending on what church you're at and how you run the overall calendar, school calendar, whatever. But transition's an event. It's not a season. Transition is a year-round strategy. And so what do I mean when I say that? This is what I mean. I sit down as the junior high person with the kids staff at the beginning of the year, and I outline the entire year with them. I want to be teaching up in 4th and 5th grade once a month. I want them to see us once a month. I want my worship person, because I had a worship staff member at Mariners, so I want them to be up there leading worship once a month. I want, my volunteers up there running games. So remember, I didn't say staff member, I said volunteers. I want my volunteers up there running games once a month. I want them to see junior high. I want to come to the overnighter that they do. I want to come to the camp that they do. I want to speak at it. I want to be visible in the right ways, in the way that says, 4th and 5th graders, you have the best ministry in the world. This ministry is made for 4th and 5th grade, and we can't wait to see you when you get to junior high. But when you're around and you're visible more often, it makes transition not a season. It makes it part of the culture. It makes it a year-round strategy. And when it comes to parents, always be ready to talk to a parent. Always have your name tag on, a T-shirt, business cards in your pocket. Like, these are things that I consider to be a uniform for a junior high youth worker. So that when you see a parent, you can easily say, oh, hey, yeah, I'm Justin. I'm the junior high pastor here at the church. I can't wait for your students. What grade are they in? Oh, 4th grade, a couple more years, they'll be with me in junior high. That's so wild. Well, it was really great meeting you. And just that quick moment says a really positive thing. When you see, little kids, like siblings of your students, go out of your way, give them a high five. What grade are you in? Oh my gosh, 2nd grade. That's so awesome. Like, you're the coolest in the world. That little moment for a 2nd grader is everything. They walk away saying, that girl likes me. They think I'm awesome. And that seed is going to be planted at a young age so that as they get older, they're going to have a really positive feel about the youth ministry. So that's some of the philosophy behind it. It's a year-round strategy. Now, when it comes to parents, it's a really simple thing. Accessibility is everything. Putting out those dates really early so parents know what's going on, being willing to sit through the Q&A session so they can ask any question they want, but remembering that this is just as much, if not a bigger transition for parents. Looking at a parent, this can be such a flippant thing with a lot of youth pastors, but it can't be. It's something we got to take seriously. Because to look at a parent and say, yeah, I know you've been checking them in every weekend for, since they were born, but, don't worry about that anymore. They're just going to run in. Just drop them off at the curb. They'll just run in. Parents are looking at you, especially parents of daughters. And I'm not trying to draw a huge, line between genders, but I've talked to parents who have daughters who are like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm just going to send them in. Aren't there 8th grade boys in there? Like, what's going on? Like, they need a little bit more safety, security explanation than just trust us. It's totally good. That's just what they do. They just drop them off. They just run in. It's no big deal. That is really dismissing what a parent probably is feeling. They're feeling the safety, securities, and question for their kid. They knew what was happening. There was a routine. Children's ministry is built on routine. Junior high ministry is not built on routine. Predictability in a children's ministry is really good. Predictability in a junior high ministry, I kind of align with what Heather Fleece talks about. She talks about the invisible structure, that to a kid, it feels like this is just so crazy and chaotic. We as a youth workers know there's an invisible structure behind everything that we're doing. But parents need to see that invisible structure. They need to know that we have a plan to what we're doing, that there's a reason why we're doing it the way we're doing it. And that openness, that conversational, essentially it's about making time, giving them your phone number. Yeah, you can have boundaries around your phone. Like, I totally respect that, but like, make time for parents so that they're not just sending them to a junior high ministry. They're sending them to be part of your ministry. They know your name. I'm shocked by how many parents don't know who their kid's pastor is. Like, I think that's a shocking thing to me. Parents should not only know who they are, like, they should know how to easily get a hold of them if something is happening in their life. And not just like, what should we pack for camp? Like, if something tragic happens in their kid's life, they should know how to easily get a hold of the youth pastor to be there for them, to be part of the family, to minister to the family. Like, it's a whole thing. So you start building that during transition season. And for students, you can do the really fun stuff. give away T-shirts, give away iPads, like have Taylor Swift come. You can do all that stuff. None of that stuff matters. We all know that. Here's what does matter. A person who knows their name. So what I like to do is be recruiting leaders. So recruiting, again, is a year-round thing. But recruiting leaders and working with the kids person to put leaders that you know are going to be junior high leaders up in kids ministry probably about 3 or 4 months before the transition to junior high, so that those leaders can start to get to know those kids, the kids that will be the future sixth graders. And then when they make the transition, Bobby, the leader, is like, hey guys, I'm going with you to junior high. This is going to be great. You know me. I know you. This is going to be awesome. Let's all go. We're going to junior high. Like, again, that's part of the strategy, the invisible structure. So then when a kid's coming to junior high, it's T-shirts and there's candy and, the whole thing's wild, right? But the safety is there's someone who's going with them, that knows their name, that knows when they're missing. It's a really big thing. Here's a last little tip. Volume, I know this doesn't sound totally weird. Volume was a really big thing. We had a pretty serious sound system. But even if you don't have a serious sound system, if a kid walks away, so children's ministry is usually very quiet. Very quiet. They have TV, maybe some very small speakers. It's very, very quiet. Shh, quiet. Kids ministry. Babies are sleeping. Someone's trying to poop somewhere. Very quiet. In junior high ministry, it's completely different, right? It's loud and it's games and it's wild. But if a kid walks out the very first time when transition happens, and the first thing they say to mom and dad when they say, oh my gosh, how was your first week in junior high? And I always told this to my staff, if the first thing they say is, wow, it's really loud in there, then we've lost. That to me was like the big measuring stick of success. If a kid says, oh my gosh, it's just really loud in there, then we've lost. So just turn down the volume. Doesn't have to be forever. No one's going to care. But even if it's obnoxiously low, just to ensure when a kid goes home, the first thing they're going to say isn't, oh, it's just so loud in there. That to me, now that might seem like a small thing. I'm sure other people have other really, really clever, really smart people things. But that's my thing. I was really anal about making sure that kids didn't walk away saying that. But that's part of the experience. Like we don't want those things to be a distraction for an 8th grader or a 7th grader. Not that big of a deal. But it's a big deal for a new 6th grader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. All right, last question. In the book, you talk about a parent advisory council. And I thought, I think you should talk about that because I don't think everybody has one of those. So what is that? How did you use it?
Yeah. Big fan of the parent advisory council. This is really easy stuff. I do not have junior high students in my house. I have really young kids. So when I knew I needed to make changes to the ministry, or I needed to set calendar, or I needed to make some decisions, it was vital to me that I had parents speaking into it. So this is what I did. I found some parents that I knew liked me. I found some parents that, maybe were kind of critics, but, this is one of the ways I got to make a fan out of a critic. And I invited them to be part of this council. We met, it was about, I think 5 couples I had, or 6 couples. We met once every couple months. I would cast vision for where we were going, in the future. I would ask them questions. I'd let them weigh in on stuff. And I got some really good information. Serious changes we made to the junior high ministry at Mariners. A lot of those really good ideas came from the parent council. But here's the most important part. It gives parents a window into what's happening in the ministry. So when someone's complaining or someone has issues, you have parents out there who have an inside look to, and we talk about this with the parent council. I mean, we sat and I said, one of the reasons that I have all this, and this is a really important reason, is so that if someone's complaining or has issues, you're able to say, hey, I actually have a window into the junior high ministry. I have a behind the scenes, behind the curtain look. And I would love you to be able to speak up and talk about what's happening with the ministry. So it was a really cheap, really pivotal, really important decision. So also when people would give me grief about stuff, I'd be able to say, well, actually, we have a group of parents that we meet with to help vet a lot of these ideas. And we talked about this at the last meeting, and it lets parents know that you are open to and are receiving wisdom and feedback from people who are actually parents. Like that goes that goes such a long way in emails. It goes a long way when you're talking on stage. It goes a long way to your boss when you're able to say, I have people who are smarter than me with more experience than me speaking into things that I don't totally understand. I don't know what it's like to drop kids off and pick kids up and manage these, elaborate schedules. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to have a junior high kid plus a high school kid plus, someone in children's ministry, and how the calendar planning affects everybody. I don't have any idea about that. I don't get multiple kids going to camp and having to pay for it. Like I go for free. Like I'm the guy running it or the girl running it. So, when you're able to have parents that are speaking into it, you invite in, it says something about your humility. It says something about your ability. And it says something about your leadership. People want to follow someone who's willing to listen to and get feedback from others. So I couldn't be a bigger raver of the parent council. Again, it's free. This does not cost any money, but it's one of those things that if you invest into it, what you're going to get out of it is influence. And I read, Leading When You're Not in Charge. Clay Stroggins talks all about influence.
Mm-hmm.
When you're able to get something that is a low level of investment with a high return of influence, that's the kind of stuff you want to put your time into, and the parent council is one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, maybe it's not used as much as it should be. I'm not really sure, but I know when I was younger volunteering in student ministry, and then there was a season there, and this is the church I grew up in, where we didn't have a youth pastor either. I definitely should have had one, because what did I know about being a parent of a teenager as a 23-year-old or 21-year-old or whatever I was at the time? Not a lot. So that would have been for sure.
And there's a ton of really good unintended consequences. When you get, and it's strategic, it's not by accident. You pull in parents who are influential parents. You never know. Maybe that parent's not an elder right now, but maybe they will be in 2 years. And I'm not saying you're doing this in manipulative way. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is you want people to have a positive view of the youth ministry, and you want people to have more of a behind the scenes look at the youth ministry. The only way to do that is to invite people in to see how it's done, and to give input to it. And you have no idea where that could lead. But it will never come back void when there's more influential people at your church who have a positive perspective, especially at junior high ministry. I'm a junior high ministry guy, so sometimes they get forgotten about. But to have people that have seen behind the curtain, it's a really big deal. It helps the ministry, and it'll help the next guy, the next girl who takes over the ministry when you inevitably leave. My parent council helped interview for the next person at Mariners. They helped, in some ways transition the ministry. They were the ones who were able to tell the new guy, first couple of weeks, hey, this is what we did for Justin, and maybe you want this, maybe you don't, but we're here for you. That is a really good thing. Part of that is that's you as a leader equipping for the longevity of your ministry and the healthy culture of your ministry. That's a really good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's about all the time we have. So how can people connect with you? Obviously, they can catch the podcast, Control Chaos, wherever they listen to podcasts, but how can they connect with you?
You know what? We can go on Instagram, Hey Justin Herman. You can go to the controlledchaos.fun. But you know what? I have a lot of time on my hands right now. Obviously, just working a job, chilling out. You can email me, Justin Herman at controlledchaos.fun. If you reach out to me, I'll make time for you. I'd love to chat. I'd love to talk about stuff. I'd love to talk about ministry. I'd love for you to check out the podcast. I do it. It's fun doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it. So there you go.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming back on the podcast again. Praying for you. You're handling this so well, and I think you are, in some ways, pastoring other youth leaders, who are in a similar spot. I appreciate that. Been there or going to be there. So
that means a lot. I appreciate that.
You bet. Thanks again. Well, I really appreciate how open and honest and vulnerable even that Justin was in that interview, as we could learn from his experience. And maybe you're like me and you've never worked at another church. I've only worked at one church, but for many of you, you have worked at multiple churches. You just got to another church. You're moving to another church. You've thought about it. And that's really, really helpful. I can't echo enough. Some of the action items I think of coming out of this podcast interview would be about this. Making sure you ask enough questions, and by enough, I mean dozens, if not over 100 questions about a church you're considering working for. You can't experience or learn enough about a church before you work there. And the same is true for us. If we're interviewing and hiring staff, we should be asking dozens of questions and learning and experiencing everything we possibly can about who we're hiring, the role, and what, you love about it, and what, fires you up and gives you energy. That's another action item you could think about right now is, could you go this week and write down, here are the things about my role that energize me, and here are the things about my role that drain me. And everybody's going to have both, but hopefully you're not giving 10 or 20% of your time to the energizing things. Hopefully you're giving 60, 50% of your time or more, 80% to those things that energize you. And if not, maybe something could change. What could change? Other action items I think about are really related to the book. Get the book, read the book, take some of the practical ideas out of there. I mean, you can take some of the information from that transition, about transitioning 5th grade into 6th grade and helping kids make that jump, and parents come along with you. And many of you are doing that right now. Some of you, though, are like me. You'll do that later when school starts in the fall. So how can you make that smooth and use this summer as an opportunity to make that transition well for families in your church? As I mentioned, you can get all the links and notes and all that at nickblevins.com/episode 147. And as I also mentioned, Ministry Boost is launching 21, courses this summer. I didn't mention this in the intro, and I should have, but they're cheap. These courses are cheaper than they've ever been, too, because we cut all the prices by 33% for most of these courses. And so there's that special summer pricing, plus 8 new courses or something like that, all this summer. But you want to sign up right away so you get all the bonuses, and you can do that at ministryboost.org. Thanks for listening. Hope this was helpful. Be sure to subscribe if you don't already so you don't miss an episode. Got another great interview coming next week. And until then, hope you have a great week. Hope you're gearing up for summer, getting ready for whatever you got to get ready for, but also making time to help yourself grow as a leader and making time to help work on your ministry and to improve it. And I hope this is helpful for that. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.